I think it's cute, Heather from HR said, tapping her coffee cup like she was about to drop the punchline of a stand-up set. How Nicole still thinks her signature matters. The room chuckled. Not loud, just the kind of smug, half-muzzled office laugh that smells like burnt K-cups and compliance fatigue. She didn't stop there. We've upgraded our processes. No more signature police roaming the halls like it's 2009. And that's when the CEO chimed in. Let's not scare the interns with paralegal-level paranoia. He smirked, adjusting his shirt like he just cracked open a cold one instead of torching 7 years of my credibility. I sat 2 rows back, legs crossed, arms folded, staring just below the whiteboard so I wouldn't risk making eye contact. My cheeks felt like microwaved ham, overcooked stiff, sweating through their casing. I didn't blink, didn't flinch, didn't give them the satisfaction, because they didn't know. They didn't know that 3 weeks before Heather paraded her power-washed MBA down the hallway, I'd slipped a line into the escrow protocol update, tucked neatly into a section no one reads, buried under terms like transactional integrity and authentication redundancy. Legal cleared it with a yawn and a thumbs up. But let's rewind for a second. I'm Nicole. I was the head of compliance at Viron Systems until I became whatever the hell a compliance liaison is. Basically, a decorative plant with inbox access. 7 years of building airtight systems, redundancies, verifications, chains of custody that could survive a nuclear winter, and they shoved it all in a drawer the second Heather showed up with her process maps and pastel slide decks. And don't get me wrong, I'm not bitter about change. I'm bitter about arrogance. There's a difference. They thought they were streamlining. I knew they were skipping steps. And here's the thing, if you've made it this far, you're probably part of the 90% who listen without subscribing. That's fine, I'm not your mom. But if you tap that subscribe button and maybe throw a like while you're at it, it keeps our little storytelling rebellion alive. And it makes Heather from HR itch. Win-win. Anyway, back to the meeting. Heather pulled up a slide titled Legacy Workflows We No Longer Need. Guess what was first on the list? My name, not compliance sign-off or documentation protocol. My name. Nicole's methods are thorough, but this isn't a courtroom, she said. It's tech, we move fast. The CEO nodded, eyes glazed with that I'm thinking about golf expression he wears anytime someone says policy. And the whole room just moved on, like I wasn't there. Like the systems I built weren't holding up half the damn infrastructure. They didn't know I'd already seen the draft of the escrow release for the acquisition. $75 million. One signature required, the CEO's, or so they thought. I'd asked twice if they needed anything from my side. Just playing dumb. Heather replied with a smiley face emoji and said, "You're all good, I documented it. Screenshotted, archived, time-stamped." Because what they didn't understand was this. I don't need to be in the room to light it on fire. I just need to make sure no one reads the fine print until it's too late. So I sat there, swallowing shame like it was lukewarm breakroom coffee while they laughed. And I watched. And I waited. And I smiled. Because if they thought mocking me in front of the company would be the last time they'd say my name out loud, they were going to be late for a very expensive surprise. Official email came through at 6:17 a.m. No subject line. Just a one-liner buried in the daily HR digest. Effective immediately, Nicole Trenner will transition into the new role of compliance liaison. No meeting, no discussion, no heads up. Just a corporate lobotomy delivered between an invitation to Bagel Thursday and a reminder to log our quarterly training. I scrolled back up, reread it 3 times, and checked the signature. Heather, of course. The title sounded like something made up during a marketing brainstorm, something they'd slap on a mousepad and forget by Q2. I'd never seen the phrase compliance liaison in any org chart, handbook, or Slack message. But hey, at least it wasn't director of vibes or chief wellness unicorn. My first instinct? Denial. I messaged legal. Hi, just to clarify, has there been a shift in the compliance sign-off structure for financial transfers above $10M? Silence. I forwarded it again. Added a little sugar this time, just circling back, want to ensure we're aligned on process for the escrow release. Let me know if I should redirect. Again, nothing. Then Heather CC'd me on a file review request addressed to Rob, the CEO's assistant, man whose idea of due diligence is printing spreadsheets and hand-delivering them in manila folders like it's 1997. That was the moment I knew. I wasn't just being pushed aside, I was being erased. And it wasn't messy. No dramatic firing, no cardboard box walk of shame, no HR escort. Just a quiet, surgical removal of authority. They didn't want me gone. They wanted me neutralized. The compliance liaison portal they gave me access to was a glorified internal wiki with 2 broken links and a list of outdated memos from 2022. I clicked around like a ghost haunting her own damn cubicle. When I requested access to the escrow chain again, because, I designed it, I got a boilerplate reply from IT. Per HR directive, access to transfer-level systems is currently restricted. I replied, that directive is in violation of Section 6.2 of the Financial Controls Act and could jeopardize procedural integrity. No response. I could almost hear Heather's voice in my head. Let her send her little emails. It makes her feel useful. They underestimated me. They always had. I built Viron's compliance infrastructure from scratch. 7 years of cleaning up after founders who thought governance was a buzzkill. 7 years of double verifying vendors, flagging irregular contracts, blocking bad money from getting good people sued. But none of that mattered anymore, apparently. Now it was Heather's world. All Slack gifts and streamlined workflows and late-night wine-fueled brainstorms with the CEO about minimizing friction. Meanwhile, they were preparing for the biggest financial event in Viron's history, a $75 million acquisition. And the digital escrow transfer, the single most delicate piece of the whole machine, was about to be handled by a man who once tried to plug his phone charger into an HDMI port. They were cutting out the one person who knew how to make sure the whole thing didn't implode. I wasn't even mad anymore. Just cold. Cold like concrete. Cold like protocol. They wanted me silent. Invisible. Fine. I'd already made my move. All I had to do now was sit in my little liaison chair, drink my lukewarm tea, and let the wheels spin toward the cliff. I'd left them just enough rope. Let's see how well they tie a knot. It started with a footnote. Not even a bold one, just an asterisk next to line 42 on page 9 of the quarterly compliance update. Titled, Escrow Authorization Safeguards Proposed Revisions. I'd been preparing that packet for weeks. Every quarter, like clockwork, I bundled together all the tweaks, revisions, and risk flags from the prior 3 months and fed them through legal like vitamins through a toddler, hidden in the applesauce of bullet points and buzzwords. But this time I laced it. One clause, one sentence, 23 words. All monetary transfers exceeding $25 million USD shall require dual approval from the acting CEO and the original compliance officer on record. That was it. No fireworks. No dramatic power play, just a perfectly bland, unassuming policy tweak folded into a doc no one wanted to read, during a week no one was paying attention. Heather was off team building at a spa. The CEO was in San Diego pretending to care about our expansion partners. And legal, bless their overworked, undercaffeinated hearts, cleared it within 24 hours. Looks good, Nick. Appreciate your thoroughness, as always. I smiled at that. Thoroughness. That's what they used to call my paranoia before the new regime came in and decided speed was a virtue and signatures were a waste of pixels. I didn't do this for revenge. Not then. I did it because something in my gut told me this whole acquisition was moving too fast, with too many shortcuts, and not nearly enough brakes. And if I couldn't control the wheel anymore, I'd damn well make sure there was a kill switch. So I coded the clause into the approval architecture. Quietly, no alerts, no fanfare. Just a backend toggle on the escrow module that would reject any transfer over $25M unless both digital keys were present. Mine and his. No way around it, not without blowing the system's audit trail wide open. And the best part? My credentials as the originating officer were still valid, buried in the system metadata, untouched by my demotion because HR had only revoked visible access. They didn't know enough to dig deeper. They never do. I could have told someone, raised a flag, given a hint, but why? Why warn the people who treated me like a cautionary tale? Who laughed behind my back like I was some relic of a bygone era before Slack channels and buzzword bingo and culture fit meant more than competence? They wanted me small, forgettable, so I vanished. But not before leaving my fingerprint on the one lever no one thought to lock. It wasn't personal, it was protocol. Cold, precise, legal. The moment that clause cleared, I knew one day they'd reach for that money. Smiling, confident, champagne chilled. And the system would look them in the eye and say, where's hers? That's not revenge. That's insurance. The office got louder. That kind of false urgency buzz you hear in startups before IPO day, or when the CFO realizes the IRS actually does audit Delaware shells if you spell the state wrong. Phones buzzing, door hinges snapping, espresso machines working overtime like they're unionized. The $75 million acquisition had moved from whisper to whiteboard. You could feel the heat coming off it, everyone suddenly over-smiling, oversharing, wearing their nice shoes on a Tuesday. Even Rob, the CEO's assistant, had traded in his crumpled hoodie for a collar. That's how I knew things were getting serious. I kept my head down. Compliance liaison apparently meant sitting in on the fringes of meetings like a potted plant, just close enough to smell the panic, but never invited to speak. That week, the finance team started assembling the escrow release packet. I watched them through the glass wall of the war room, which was just a repurposed conference space where ideas went to suffocate under dry erase fumes. I asked nicely twice about the authorization path. Hey, just wanted to confirm, said to Jared from Treasury. For the release workflow, did legal sign off on a dual-auth structure? Or are you still routing it through single credential access? He blinked like I asked him to name his own blood type. I think we're good, he mumbled, already turning back to his laptop. I emailed Heather. Per Q2 protocol revision, just checking if we're ensuring dual signatures on escrow transfers above $25M. Her reply came 11 minutes later. No worries, it's all handled by the CEO directly now. You don't need to be involved. Smiling face with smiling eyes, I stared at the emoji for a full minute, that passive-aggressive little egg yolk of a face. I replied, understood. Just ensuring we're not in violation of our updated compliance requirements. Let me know if you'd like me to send over the clause. No response. Again. At lunch, I overheard Heather talking to someone from sales. She still thinks she's part of this, she said. It's almost sad. Then, like a cherry on the shit sundae, honestly, she doesn't matter anymore. It wasn't even whispered. I went back to my desk. No theatrics, no confrontation. Just logged in, opened the compliance change log, and downloaded everything. Every approval chain, every timestamp, every legal sign-off. I exported the clause, full version, not the digest, and stored it in 3 separate places. An encrypted USB key, a private cloud folder, and a paper copy I printed and slid into a file labeled Office Plants Do Not Discard. They wanted me invisible. Fine, I'd be air. But air can suffocate. Every afternoon that week, I took my tea near the break room closest to the war room. Just close enough to hear snippets. Escrow ID 346K signature hash mismatch ETA on compliance approval. They didn't even realize they were missing a piece. The CEO kept stomping through the halls like a man who'd already cashed the check in his head. I watched him clap Rob on the back one morning and say, "We're gonna be legends, kid." Rob laughed like a golden retriever in a necktie. The deal was moving. The machine was spinning. But every machine has a fuse, and I had already lit mine. The building was mostly dark by 7:45 p.m., just the hum of the server room down the hall and the flicker of motion sensors catching ghosts. I sat alone in my corner pod, the fluorescent light above me twitching like it had a nervous tick, casting little Morse code warnings across my keyboard. Everyone else had cleared out hours ago. Heather had left around 4 with her usual chirp, "Let's crush tomorrow, team," and a tote bag full of empty optimism. The CEO had his usual Thursday night off-site dinner with a guy named Brent from the investor group. I assume they spent it high-fiving over Wagyu sliders and forgetting how compliance works. I was exactly where I wanted to be, logged into the back-end dashboard, watching, waiting. The escrow release system, escrow SysV 2.3, if you want to get nerdy, was being prepped for deployment. Could tell by the traffic logs, the IP pings, and the refresh rate on the approval queue. Someone from IT was doing final sanitation checks. Finance had already staged the packet. Rob's credentials were queued, and still not one ping to me. No one noticed the red warning buried halfway down the protocol screen. Warning, auth002 / missing required signature. Originating compliance officer. That message, it wouldn't trigger an alarm. Not right away. Not unless someone actually clicked into the log and traced the audit trail. It was just a breadcrumb. But tomorrow, when they pressed release funds and it bounced back like a bad check, that breadcrumb would become a crater. I hovered over the access panel, watching the timestamp inch closer to 8 p.m. I could have stopped it. I could have flagged the issue again, sent a final email, posted a Slack reminder. But what's the point of screaming when you're in a soundproof box no one's listening to? Instead, I opened the reporting module and queued a scheduled drop. 1 automatic compliance report. Full audit history. Full legal approval. Full clause documentation, complete with metadata signatures. Scheduled to land in the inboxes of legal, finance, the CEO, and just for poetic symmetry, Heather, at exactly 9:01 a.m. That way, it'd have 1 minute to feel smug before the floor dropped. I logged out, removed my ID badge, and laid it neatly next to the office ficus, still labeled Nicole's plant, do not water. Then I stood for a moment in the center of that quiet room, breathing in the dust and data, the ghost of 1,000 overlooked policies that held this place together long after the C-suite stopped pretending to care. No anger, no bitterness, just stillness. Because the fuse was already lit. Tomorrow would be the blast. Tonight was the silence before the scream. At exactly 9 o'clock a.m., the Zoom call kicked off with the synthetic chime of digital confidence. Inside the boardroom, someone had brought in a tower of blueberry muffins and a carafe of lukewarm ambition labeled Investor Blend. Heather was mid-laugh when the CEO clapped his hands and declared, "Let's get this party started." The lead investor, Malcolm Crane, mid-60s, gray-templed, glacier-eyed, appeared on-screen with 2 younger analysts flanking him like silent bouncers. "Thanks for making time," the CEO said, voice syrupy with charm. "We're thrilled to finalize this morning. Viron's ready to move forward with full transparency and maturity, and we know this is the beginning of something special." Heather nodded along, already holding her pastry like it was a mic. "Everyone's been incredible. The team's just dialed in, especially on compliance. It's really a new." I wasn't in the room. No one expected me to be. I was sitting across the street in a grimy coffee shop that didn't even bother frothing the milk, stirring a tea bag like it owed me rent. I'd left my laptop open, headphones in, tuned into the meeting through the company-wide stream meant for optional observers. Optional, that's what they'd called me. In the boardroom, finance had lined up the digital packet. Rob had clicked the final confirmation at 8:57. Everything was queued, $75 million ready to move. The CEO leaned back, beaming, "We've already staged the transfer, just waiting for green light on your end, Malcolm." The analysts tapped on keyboards. Malcolm adjusted his glasses. Silence for 2 seconds, then 3. One analyst frowned, scrolling through something off-screen. Malcolm's voice came low and flat. I see the CEO's signature on the escrow packet, but where's hers? The room blinked. Sorry. CEO asked too fast. Malcolm didn't blink. Nicole Trenner, your originating compliance officer. The clause in your Q2 compliance update requires her signature for any escrow release above $25 million. I only see one. Pulse shift. Muffins stopped mid-bite. Heather looked up like someone had just slapped her with a PDF. I think that's outdated, she said quickly. Nicole's not part of that process anymore. Malcolm turned to his analyst. Show me the metadata. A click. A pause. Then the younger man spoke. Clause is valid, signed by legal, dated 7 weeks ago, embedded in the approved policy framework and still in effect. The CEO's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Malcolm leaned forward just a fraction. Your systems show one signature. This requires two. If that's not resolved, the funds don't move. 9:02 a.m., right on schedule, across the street. My compliance report auto-deployed. A digital time bomb disguised as protocol. The blast radius just starting to spread. And back in that boardroom, every eye turned to the CEO. Every nerve, every smile, every illusion of control gone. Frozen, dead center in the crater. Legal hit the table like a dropped casserole. Elise from corporate counsel came in mid-scroll, laptop still tethered to its charger, hair half-tied in a panic knot that screamed. I was not invited to this fire, but now I'm the extinguisher. Heather practically flung her phone at her. There's gotta be a mistake. Nicole doesn't even work in compliance anymore. Elise didn't answer. Just typed like her fingers were chasing a train. She pulled up the compliance archive, flipped through the Q2 update, and stopped cold. On the screen, Section 4.2, the escrow release protocols. Revised, all monetary transfers exceeding $25 million USD shall require dual authorization from the acting CEO and the originating compliance officer on record at the time of process initiation. Elise looked up. This went through, fully approved. Legal signed off. Timestamp matches. It's active, but Nicole was reassigned. The CEO barked, his voice cracking like a cheap laminate desk. She was removed from that role weeks ago. Elise didn't blink. She submitted this before her reassignment. And per metadata logs, her credential remains listed as the originating officer for this specific transaction stream. Unless someone formally amended the policy or reassigned the credential chain, she stopped. Looked at Heather. Did anyone file the reassignment with systems compliance? Heather opened her mouth, then shut it because the answer was no. It changed her title, not the wiring underneath. They'd painted over the lock without changing the key. The investor's analyst cleared his throat. Would you like me to read it aloud? Malcolm gestured. Please do. The analyst, calm as a surgeon, read each word like a eulogy. All transfers exceeding $25M require dual authorization from the acting CEO and the originating compliance officer. Originating compliance officer, Nicole Trenner. The room went stone quiet. You could hear someone's phone vibrate on the table. Heather muttered, but she doesn't have system access. She doesn't need it, Elise said. Her credential is embedded at the policy level. It's hard-coded. The system needs her digital signature, not her login. Rob looked like he might cry. He kept mouthing something silently. Malcolm leaned back. So this transaction has been initiated without valid compliance. Is that what I'm hearing? Lise nodded once. Correct. Then we're not moving a single cent. Heather turned pale, blinking at the muffins like they might offer legal advice. The CEO's face sagged, colorless like a man watching his own obituary scroll across the screen. Across the street, I stirred my tea, didn't smile, didn't flinch. Just watched the slow-motion car crash unfold with the serenity of a surgeon who knew exactly where to cut. They erased me from the org chart, but they forgot I wrote the damn blueprint. Now they were scrambling over protocol they never bothered to understand. And I just sat back and let the ink dry. The room cracked open at the seams. Not with noise, but with the absence of it. The kind of hush that falls right after someone accidentally hits reply all on a termination memo or discovers a folder labeled "Do Not Open" during a forensic audit. The CEO tried to salvage it. Let's not get bogged down in semantics, he said, forcing a chuckle that landed like a wet sock on a tile floor. We're happy to correct the oversight. Rob, resend the packet. Malcolm raised one hand. Not high, not dramatic, just enough to cut the air like a scalpel. We don't override compliance protocols, he said flatly. Especially not on transactions of this magnitude. We're not cowboys, gentlemen, we're fiduciaries. Rob looked like he wanted to crawl under the conference table and never return. The CEO's fingers twitched toward his tablet, trying to pull up the escrow interface. Maybe we can trigger a manual override, just temporarily. I wouldn't do that, Elise said quietly. He looked at her. Excuse me? Attempting to bypass an active compliance clause without system authorization creates a violation flag. Our internal logging framework would auto-report it to the audit server and potentially trigger Clause 6.4 under the investor agreement. Clause 6.4, the one that allowed Malcolm's firm to freeze not just the deal but the entire funding line if any fraud-adjacent behavior was detected. The CEO's face went blank. Heather piped up, too fast, too shrill. We might have an exemption on file. Some kind of legacy override for outdated roles. I remember seeing a memo, maybe from facilities. Even Rob flinched at that. A memo from facilities? Malcolm repeated like she just said the protocol was buried in a box of Cheerios. Heather adjusted her chair, or maybe IT. Or, oh, we had an intern rotating through policy the week of that update. He may have reviewed it. Reviewed what exactly? The analyst asked, already typing. Heather blinked. Just general things. IT finally joined the call. Lisa from Systems, voice like a crowbar. We've reviewed the compliance logs. And Malcolm asked. The clause is valid. It was committed on April 18th, logged into the policy engine with full legal sign-off and pushed to the live approval chain before Nicole's role change. No one modified the credential mapping, and her authority remains embedded in the active protocol. Her digital key is required to unlock the transfer. Can we override? The CEO snapped. Lisa didn't hesitate, not without triggering a noncompliance audit. Silence again. You could practically hear Heather's career wheezing its last breath through the pastry crumbs on the table. I don't understand, she muttered. She doesn't even work here anymore. Malcolm tilted his head. Seems she worked here just long enough to do your job for you. Elise closed her laptop like a coffin lid. Across the street, I scrolled through my inbox, watching the post-blast wave ripple outward. Dozens of messages. Can you clarify? Did you mean urgent? Call me? I didn't reply. They'd built a machine without reading the manual, and now it had locked itself. I sipped my tea, the taste of quiet vindication. Let them sweat, let them scramble, because there's no smugness like the kind that collapses under its own weight. No silence louder than when a $75 million deal goes ice cold because the woman they thought was just a formality rewrote the rules before she left the building. Malcolm didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. He leaned in ever so slightly toward the mic, eyes calm, tone clinical, like a man confirming the time of death on a watch that never stopped ticking. About the $75 million escrow transfer scheduled for 9 a.m., the room froze. Malcolm glanced at his watch. A Rolex probably older than Rob's career. It's 9:02, he continued. It needed two approvals, a pause, heavy enough to make the HVAC system sound like a freight train. I see the CEO's, Malcolm said. Where's hers? 3 words, where's hers? Heather stopped breathing. Her hand hovered midair, still holding a bite of half-eaten muffin like it might deflect accountability. Her face drained of every last drop of smug gloss. The CEO didn't move, didn't blink. He just stared ahead, jaw slack, as if he could feel the zeros slipping off the wire transfer like marbles falling into a drain. Malcolm sat back, that was it, the final pin pulled. The silence that followed was a silence that understood weight, consequence. The kind that echoes not in sound but in the lack of rebuttal, because there was nothing to say. No denial, no spin, no memo from facilities, only a gaping hole where foresight should have been. Back across the street, I sat on a worn bench outside the building, coffee cooling in my hands. The breeze flicked strands of hair across my face. I let it. I watched birds fight over a crust of bread near the curb. I watched Heather step out of the building on her phone, mouth moving fast, eyes darting. She didn't see me, didn't have to. Because right then, inside that conference room, my final report triggered the follow-up audit. A quiet compliance alert. Automatic, timed, immutable. It would call for a full review of all recent financial authorizations and clause modifications. It would flag everything. And it would start not with the CEO, not with Heather, but with me, the ghost in their system. The name they laughed at, deleted from the directory, joked about over lunch. And yet, still embedded, still required, still holding the key. They didn't fire me, they didn't demote me, they tried to erase me. But erasing only works if the paper doesn't remember who wrote the first draft. I took a sip of my coffee. It had gone cold, but it tasted just fine. Big thanks for watching, you sneaky seniors. Subscribe to keep the coffee pot brewing revenge. Your ex-colleagues won't know what hit 'em.